to organize it, expect people to come, speak, and listen to you. So I'm reasonably sure that such things haven't happened earlier. And I say this because in the course of organizing this conference, I felt that if ever this was thought of earlier, there would have been even more hindrances, there would have been even more challenges than what one faces today. We've come a long, long way. A media conference otherwise is a media conference. I just changed my Facebook status a couple of days back to share that there's going to be a Hindu media conference, and I realized the kind of comments that I saw in terms of what is Hindu about media. Media is media. I realize that there is, and this is from very educated, very enlightened, very successful Hindus within the society who feel that the nomenclature Hindu as a prefix or suffix must raise certain worries and concerns. I wonder where that has come from. I go back, I was perhaps too young, but when I grew up and I studied about the years gone by, I realized that our first Prime Minister, in fact, had once said that I am by education outlook a Westerner, a European. I am by culture and upbringing a Muslim. And I am only by accident a Hindu. I wonder what made him say so. It was during his time that one of his chief economists, Mahalanobis, had coined this term Hindu rate of growth, which was abysmal 2 to 3% a year. I wonder where is this self-loathing rooted in? I wonder where do we find justification for painting the word Hindu into such hues? But when you ask as to where is this coming from, you cannot but go back to these profound experiences in the past which have shaped our collective consciousness. Psychologists, psychoanalysts have written a lot about it. In fact, there is an entire body of literature about the self-hating Jew, where a person perhaps for some reason internalizes the fact that his identity or the group that he belongs to has something deficient, has something to be ashamed about. And this internalizing of it generates the kind of mindset which variously is defined as autophobia. I mean, there is an entire science about it. There is an entire logic evolved and books written about it. I find it difficult that we ourselves as individuals and as a collective often get caught into it. And those last few decades of our economy, our poverty, our deprivation, our lack of development, forcing the brightest amongst us to queue up in front of European and American embassies from wee hours of the morning for visas to flee. Our entrepreneurs, straitjacketed, shackled, from contributing to the economy. I don't know how many of you do even know that till just about 30 years back, 35 years back, we had a 97% rate of personal income tax. We had prison terms waiting for those industrialists who produced more than they were licensed to, even out of efficiency. I think having come through those stages of economy, having suffered, and today having found our entrepreneurial spirit, as we progress, as we try and seek our space in this world, we need to, without blaming someone else, search within, relook at ourselves, and see whether some of these long-held prejudices against our own selves, not against someone else, are justified, need to be reviewed, revisited, and this low self-esteem that we often betray needs to be shed. Let me move to the second word of this title, Hindu Media Conference. Media, as we know today, is less than 100 years old. In less than these 100 years, mass media is going through some huge convergence. We are not there yet in terms of a total change, but the direction, the speed, the scale, the scope of this change today forces us to look at what lies ahead in a more serious, analytical way. It is for that reason we are getting together in order to track some of those changes, and we have some of the thought leaders who will share with us the direction of those changes, the causes of those changes. But more than the physical aspect of it, more than the technological aspect of it, the content, I mean, news media is still maybe less than 10% of the total media usage, consumption. It is the entertainment media that is today impacting and shaping our lives, because that is consumed as some kind of a daily fix we cannot do without. And how insidiously that is changing and impacting our lives. Is it making us more and more acquisitive? Is it making us more and more hyper-consumptive? Is it changing our values, the way we look at the world, the way we look at interpersonal relationships? Is it making us so competitive as to pay any price for success? I think these are some of the moot points we need to raise here in terms of what is our cinema, what is our television, what is our music, what are our lyrics, what is our net doing to us. While there are huge positives, there are huge pluses in terms of information availability, in terms of flattening of the world, in terms of breaking away from the dependence of few money bags to get published, be heard, be read, be seen, which is of course a huge plus. Where is this information overload, entertainment overload, news overload leading us? How good is it? How to sort it? And we have some very interesting speakers lined up to tell us how to find our way through it and be on the right side of this change. There are about 6 sessions, one of which is an open session. We start with the news and how we find an opportunity, or is there one? And if it isn't, what are the reasons for its absence? The opportunity or the place for a Hindu perspective. I have an eminent line of speakers here. Professor M.D. Nalapath is amongst us, and the other speakers have already joined us. Mr. Umesh Upadhyay, who's the President News at CNN-IBN, will be shortly amongst us to take his place here. This will be followed by the second session, which is on technology and the changing media consumer, what kind of world we are looking ahead at, and how do we gear up for those changes? How do we be ready and be on the right side of these changes in the times to come? And those times are not too far away. That panel is going to be headed by a very eminent thought leader in this space, Mr. Amit Khanna, whom you know as a very eminent filmmaker and also the chairman of Reliance Infotainment till recently. Our 4 sessions tomorrow are about the changing nature of the commerce of media. How is this enterprise going to change in the years to come? Where are the new revenue streams coming from to replace the old ones that are dying? How is the media consumer going to dictate the changes in terms of how you disseminate, what kind of content you disseminate, and at what cost? And where will the advertisers go who have been the lifeblood of a media enterprise till now? We also have a session on social media, which is making waves. Social media is the quintessential leitmotif of a flat media world that we increasingly see around us. But it also represents the information overload that we dread, that seems to inundate us. How do we change our consumption patterns? How do we tune our consumption patterns? How do we wade through that kind of data? Is something that we learn from those who are making waves in this segment of social media. So I welcome you again to this Hindu Media Conference. We will have sessions which last about 75 to 80 minutes. Each speaker would be requested to confine to 12 minutes so that there is enough time for interaction. And I feel 12 minutes is good enough time to make a few points that you want to make emphatically. And there will be, of course, the chairman of the session who will moderate. And I would urge them to not only sum up what is happening, but enrich these sessions with their own detailed take. I wish you all the best and welcome you again to Hindu Media Conference. Thank you very much for coming. May I first request Professor Nalapat, Mr. Kiran Ram Sahai, Swamiji, to kindly take their seats. Umesh Upadhyay, who is on his way, has just confirmed will be here any time. Is Mr. Lokesh Maharaj here by any chance? Would you please come? We have Mr. Lokesh Maharaj here. He is an entrepreneur with Trinidad, with Jagrati TV and radio from Trinidad. Kindly take your seat.
Shall we start? Come. Well, I just want to say that I'm really privileged to be here, and I thank Sushil for having invited me. I just want to say a few brief remarks, and if you can hear me, I think I can stay here and say that. You know, my blood group is actually O, and that's what's called a universal blood group. In the sense, anyone can get a transfusion from me. I believe that Sanatana Dharma is, in that sense, a universal kind of group. In the sense that wherever people who are true followers of Sanatana Dharma settle down, in whichever location, they merge seamlessly into that location. Not all blood groups are similarly situated. You have some blood groups that if you enter the bloodstream of many people, of many types, then there's a reaction in the bloodstream. And sometimes that reaction can also be even fatal. But the blood type O is a blood type which is universal. And I think that is, in my view, the core attribute of Sanatana Dharma. The fact that it is, in a sense, a culture that is universal, that enables people to move seamlessly across cultures and, in a sense, refuse to have the kind of barriers and the kind of walls that are artificially created between cultures. Now, an individual who speaks English or Sanskrit or German or Malayalam, he or she is as much a good a follower of Sanatana Dharma as anybody else. A person who wears any kind of dress, I mean, whether it's a business suit, whether it is a pajama, whatever it is, whether it's a munda and veshti, as we do in Kerala, it's a very convenient dress for the weather of Kerala. That person, he or she, is a follower of Sanatana Dharma. So it is that universality. It is that universality of vision, it's that universality of acceptance that I think is the core value of Sanatana Dharma. And I think this is why when we talk in terms of, I mean, now of course Sushil has used the word Hindu media, I'd like to just say the word Sanatana Dharma media. This particular kind of media, in a sense, has a universal application across the world. In the sense that if it is truly this core identity, this core universality is brought out in the media, then this media is relevant to every single human being and every single human society on the planet. It is relevant in a very positive way to every human being and to every society on the planet. But that is a factual position. But that is a position that is, in a sense, it should be. But what is the position now? The position now we find is that let's take a glass of water. Let's mix a drop of ink and perhaps a drop of milk in the water. The ink dissolves much faster and colors the water very, very completely. So what we are seeing today is that media which is in a sense inky, which is in a sense coloring the water, dissolving it, in a sense almost polluting the clear water, that mixes and mingles very, very quickly, whereas media that is more positive, media that reacts positively on the water, that in a sense freshens the water, that in a sense keeps the purity of the water, that media we find the dissemination is somehow much slower. I think Sushil's intention is calling this conference was to ensure that at least in future, ways and means need to be found for two things. One is to ensure that universality of spirit and that universality of thinking which characterizes Sanatana Dharma. There are creeds. I mean, you have Wahhabism, you have other creeds, which are not universal at all, which are very particular, which are very exclusive. The greatness of Sanatana Dharma, it is not particular, it is not exclusive. So I think part of my friend Sushil's objective was to ensure that we are made aware, each of us, of that universality, and we reject any efforts at this kind of particularity or exclusion. And the second is, how can this universal message get disseminated in a very, very accurate and a very, very effective way across societies? How can this kind of media be as effective? I mean, how can that drop of milk be as effective as that drop of ink? Because so long as the ink dominates over the milk, we are going to find our society continuing to have multiple problems. I'm sure, Sushil, that at the end of this process, you are going to find ways in which that drop of milk can spread much faster and hopefully drive out that drop of ink. Thank you very much. And I would like to begin this by requesting the Paramacharya to begin his oration.
Om Ganeshaya Namaha. While they're getting things organized, I want to tell you just a very short sadness that I had in coming here from Hawaii. And that was that I was asked twice to not use the H word. This is something that I find enormously annoying and uninformed outside of India. Inside of India, I understand it. I fully do comprehend the issues involved and why we want to say Sanatana Dharma. Outside of India, this is never going to fly. You're never going to change the Webster's Dictionary word for our religion. It's going to be Hinduism, and we need to be proud of it. And I'm so glad we said the Hindu media and not the Sanatana Dharma media. Thank you, Sushil. So we can begin. I'd like to start by saying Bharat Mata Ki Jai. So I've been a sannyasin living in Hawaii for 48 years, and I've been the editor of this magazine since 1979. And I've been tasked today to share our own global experience of publishing from the West. And also, I want to give you some perceptions on the evolution of Hinduism in the West. So our magazine's founder, Subramanya Swami, was an innovative spiritual leader whose global vision transformed the diaspora outside of India. He's really understood the power of the press, and he created this publication for the entire Dharmic world. He had traveled to dozens of countries in the 1970s, and in those travels he found out that the Hindus in Fiji didn't know that there were Hindus in Canada. The Hindus in Sri Lanka were unaware of their brothers and sisters in Trinidad or South Africa. That Mauritius Hindus knew little about Switzerland's Hindus. And so he commissioned us to connect our widely dispersed family through the magazine. And from that day, we have gathered thousands of stories from every continent. So I want to share some of the milestones of our journey so far before I take you into a history. On July 5th of 1996, a sheep named Dolly was born in Scotland. This is a special sheep. Hello, Dolly. Here she is in Scotland. Dolly's birth began a firestorm in my country about the ethics of cloning mammals and ultimately cloning human beings. Bill Clinton, the president at the time, created a Blue Ribbon Committee to reach out to the 5 major US religions, including Hinduism, for their stance on the ethics of this human cloning idea. The president's panel asked Hinduism Today editors to submit a dharmic perspective on human cloning. And I take this as an example of the media's ability to inform government policy. 3 years later, Hinduism Today redefined patient treatment in the US when the Texas Medical Association approached us to help them revise a book on 33 medical conditions. The book was called Faith of Our Patients, and it's a physician's guide for treating patients in accord with their religious beliefs. Hindu perceptions on such matters had too long been neglected in the West, and so we accepted that challenge, and we reached out to spiritual leaders all over the globe, assembling their responses. Our editorial team published a 24-page summary of medical ethics, which is available free online. In 2009, we were called upon to compose the first Hindu declaration of climate change. We presented this declaration at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Melbourne, Australia that year. Surveying the field of Hindu media, we are prompted to call for a more aesthetic, thoughtful, a more penetrating dharmic journalism, which stresses skilled writing and graphics that will lift the spirit, inform the intellect, and embolden pride. You may recognize most of these modern-day luminaries on the screen, chosen for their international impact on our faith and their full-time commitment to their work. In fact, if anyone here knows of a candidate for the Hindu of the Year award next year, we would love to hear from you. We also provide a free digital news feed called Hindu Press International, which is issued daily on a wide variety of dharmic subjects and events. So now I want to turn the clock back to see how profoundly yoga and Hinduism have evolved in the last 100 years in the US media. Compare this 1911 image of an ash-covered yogi with this sultry invitation to yoga in an upscale spa. Back in 1911, Current Literature magazine published an article called The Heathen Invasion of America, which concluded, literally, yoga means the path that leads to wisdom. Actually, it's providing the way that leads to domestic infelicity and insanity and death. Time put yoga on its cover. 100 years later, Time magazine wrote this: stars do it, sports do it, judges in the highest courts do it. Let's do it, that yoga thing. A path to enlightenment that winds back 5,000 years to its native India. Yoga has suddenly become so hot, so cool, so very this minute. Time put this on the cover twice, once in 2001 where they called it a science, and again in 2003 where they wrote of the potential for medical, mental, and physical health. Reading these Time magazine articles, you might think the media in my country was pointed in the right direction. but you would be wrong. Take, for example, the June 6th CNN article by Jessica Rivets, who spent 2 weeks in Rishikesh meeting with swamis and visiting ashrams and yoga schools. Her article spoke respectfully of the spiritual richness she encountered on the Ganges. And CNN had dozens of great photos of Jessica's pilgrimage. But they opted to go with the most bizarre photo possible, this 105-year-old yogi in a pretzel-like pose. An otherwise great article was marred by CNN's insolent choice. Happily, there's other forces at work in my country where yoga is so mainstream that you can now download more than 2,000 iPhone apps relating to yoga. Much to the consternation of Christian fundamentalists in my country, yoga is infiltrating the corporations, including these leading businesses that are all providing on-site yoga classes for their employees. Many who come into yoga in the West eventually go deep enough to discover Hinduism. In my country, yoga is definitely a major portal into the Hindu faith. More than 22 million Americans and 2 million Canadians practice yoga, driving a $20 billion industry there. You may not know that Michelle Obama holds children's yoga classes on the White House lawn. It's part of her effort to fight obesity in American kids, to get them physically active. She calls it a yoga garden, and she regularly brings professional teachers to the White House lawn. But while the First Lady does yoga with kids in Washington, things are moving in a different direction in a California school district near San Diego. There, yoga classes have been designed for children ages 6 to 11. It's a rather elaborate and beautifully designed program. And it all started with a 3 crore grant from a local KP Joyce Foundation to create a wellness program for kids. But for some, yoga is a 4-letter word and the path to perdition. So one group of parents asked a judge to stop classroom yoga, and the attorneys in the case argued that teaching Hatha Yoga promotes Indian spirituality. Conservative radio commentators insisted that yoga is religious doctrination and has no place in a public school in a secular country. On the other side, parents hired attorneys to defend their children's right to learn yoga in school. And on July 1, 2013, the presiding judge, John Mayer, ruled that yoga could stay in the U.S. classroom, opening the door for thousands of schools to adopt similar programs. This is not the only court battle in my litigious country. As of June 1 of this year, the U.S. government had issued 1,876 copyrights relating to yoga, 567 patents, and 2,993 trademarks. Yoga teachers in my country are trying to shackle each other's hands. They're suing for trademark and patent infringement of asanas and yoga terms. And our team in Hawaii is following these various court battles. Consider another media shift. Lisa Miller, a senior Newsweek editor, wrote a provocative editorial recently titled, "We Are All Hindus Now," we meaning Americans, complete with this Ganesha imagery. She reported that 33% of Americans cremate their dead, 25% believe in reincarnation, and fully 65% believe that other spiritual paths are valid. In the decades ahead, we are going to see Hinduism's profundities and passions rediscovered, not only abroad, but dare we hope here in Bharat as well. I'd like to conclude with the U.S. media's treatment of Mr. Modi's recent visit to the United States, which has already changed perceptions there. The press, normally dismissive of Bharat's leaders, adored him, writing effusively of his intelligence, his stamina, his clear commitment to change. As you all may have seen, he gained almost rock star status at Madison Square Garden. And most of you witnessed a Gandhian moment when he fasted for days on water during the Washington events, impressing Americans with his spiritual discipline. And it won't surprise anyone in this room that the most negative reporting came from his homeland. Still, that visit caused a change in my country's attitudes towards Bharat Mata, a change that I suspect will endure. My staff in Hawaii is available to help anyone, a journal here in India, to implement new technologies. You can learn more about our work in the West and global efforts to spread Hinduism here at www.hinduismtoday.com. Om Namah Shivaya.
Thank you very much, Paramacharya. I mean, the dedication that you have and the profound wisdom that you have demonstrated in this, it's something which is beyond words. I just want to add a small personal point that my Hinduism is a bit like oxygen. Oxygen is everywhere. You can't live without it, but you really can't see it. I'm not sure you can touch it or feel it, but it's there everywhere. So my Hinduism is a bit like that oxygen. And I think each of us has our own Hinduism. I think that is part of the reason why, as you're correctly saying, that many societies are coming towards what I would still refer to as Sanatana Dharma, but which, as I said, I admire your conviction. You will refer to as something which is, in my view, the same, which is Hinduism. Swamiji, thank you very much for an absolutely, I mean, for something which is impossible for me to describe in words. It has really moved me enormously. Is Umesh here? Umesh Upadhyay? Good. Oh, there you are. Please go ahead.
Respected chairman of the session and veteran journalist, Professor Nalpat, respected and Shraddheya Paramacharya Sadashivanath Swamiji, Sri Lokesh Maharaj, who has come all the way from Trinidad and Tobago, and if I'm getting the pronunciation right, from Mauritius, Sri Kiran Ramasahib, Ramsahib. Yeah. Sri Sushil Pandit, ladies and gentlemen. We heard Swamiji and it's quite an eye-opener. My speech deals with basically from Indian perspective. When Sushil Pandit, whom I know from my JNU days, invited me for this event, I didn't have to think twice, because Sushil is known for his contribution in the field of media and communication, and I greatly admire him as a professional, and I value him as a great friend. Thank you, Sushil, for inviting me. But you know, when I received the invitation, formal invitation, I was a bit puzzled, let me admit it, because the title of the conference was Hindu Media Conference. Because in my 25 years of journalism, I never heard this phrase called Hindu media. I never, thought in the context of religion. And I always thought media is media. And I don't think it can be painted in a narrow religious context. Today, I'm here as a journalist, as a media person, and from a professional standpoint, and in the Indian context. This is an important event, important news event, because professionals from across the world has gathered together to discuss the issues pertaining to Hindu. Because when you think of Hindu, you always think of, Bhagwa Veshdharis, sadhus, but never people thought in context of professionals getting together to discuss issues of importance. Then I, searched what is this all about, and I stumbled upon Sushil's Facebook page on this. He put a post on this, and let me read some of the reactions that came on the post. So one Mr. Dipal Kumar Bose writes, I have been a media person for over 50 years. I have never heard a term called Hindu media. Another Mr. Avinash Chandra Saxena responded by stating, and I quote, Hindu media was something unusual in journalism. Another senior, an ex-BBC, Ramananda, who is a friend of mine, and he writes, Googling Hindu media, Islamic media, Christian media, and amazed at the results thrown up. Eye-opening. I couldn't go beyond that. And one Mr. Om Prakash Trehan wondered if there was any Hindu media person in our country. I don't know. Now let me steal a quote from Sushil's post. And Sushil responded to these posts by saying, and I quote, media is media. But when Hindus from across the globe get together to understand its processes, to use such an understanding for the larger good of their own society stroke community, they call such an event Hindu Media Conference. Rightly put. I agree with Sushil wholeheartedly. Media is media. And let's understand and be clear that there can be no Hindu media, Muslim media, or for that matter, Christian media in that context. And I would feel that let's confine media away from narrow religious context. अगर मैं हिंदी में इस बात को कहूं तो मीडिया सिर्फ मीडिया है. उसे मजहबी आधार पर बांटना ना तो संभव है, न तर्क संगत है और न उचित है, खासकर भारतीय समाज में. और भारतीय समाज बहुत इंक्लूसिव है. पीसफुल कोएग्जिस्टेंस यानी शांतिपूर्ण सह अस्तित्व उसकी आस्था का केंद्र बिंदु है, उसके डीएनए का हिस्सा है. और इस नाते मीडिया का क्या काम है? मीडिया का काम है जो जैसा है, जैसा हो रहा है, उसे वैसा दिखाना और समाज के सामने रखना, ताकि समाज उससे सबक लेके आगे जा सके. अगर खुद हम मीडिया को रंग देंगे या उसे मजहबी चश्मा पहनाएंगे तो वो वैसा नहीं दिखा पाएगा जैसा है. वह शायद अपनी मर्यादा को खो देगा. ये हो सकता है कि जो मीडिया संस्थान हैं उनकी अपनी प्रतिबद्धता या नजरिया हो. मीडिया का नजरिया नहीं होगा, लेकिन जो संस्थान है उनका नजरिया, उनकी प्रतिबद्धता हो सकती है. और ये निर्भर करता है उनकी संरचना, वो कैसे हैं, और उनके मालिकाना स्वरूप पर. संस्थानों के झुकाव हो सकते हैं, बायसेस हो सकते हैं. उदाहरण के लिए भारत में कई राजनीतिक दल अखबार चलाते हैं. दक्षिण में बहुत सारी राजनीतिक पार्टियां अपने टेलीविजन चैनल चलाती हैं. कुछ धार्मिक संस्थान भी ऐसा करते हैं, हम सब जानते हैं. इसलिए उनके अपने आग्रह हैं, लेकिन समाज को वो पूरे स्पष्ट हैं, लोग उनके बारे में जानते हैं. और जब समाज उनको अच्छी तरह से जानता है तो उनका महत्व और प्रभाव दोनों ही सीमित हैं. भारत के चुनावों की बात करें, अभी स्वामी जी बात कर रहे थे 2014 के चुनावों की, मई में जो कुछ हुआ, अगर सिर्फ मीडिया के कुछ लोग प्रभावित कर पाते तो ये परिवर्तन संभव ही नहीं थे। भारत के राजनीतिक पटल पर जो परिवर्तन पिछले कई सालों से, एक चुनाव की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं, इसलिए भारतीय समाज ने इस बात को बार बार सिद्ध किया है कि जो बायसेस हैं कुछ ग्रुप्स के, वो पूरे समाज को उतना प्रभावित नहीं करते। संस्कृत में जैसा कहते हैं कि अति सर्वत्र वर्जयेत, अतिवादी विचार की जगह ना तो भारत में है न भारतीय मीडिया में। हमारा डीएनए ही ऐसा है। हमारी चिंतन परंपरा, हमारी सांस्कृतिक विलक्षणता और आम भारतीय की बुनियादी समझ सब इसी की ओर इंगित करती है। वैसे तो यहाँ बहुत बड़े बड़े विद्वान बैठे हैं। हिंदू क्या होता है, हिंदू को किस तरीके से परिभाषित करना चाहिए, हाउ टू डिफाइन, रीडिफाइन, अंडरस्टैंड हिंदू, वो उसकी तार्किक, तात्विक, सैद्धांतिक परिभाषा कर सकते हैं। दार्शनिक व्याख्या भी हो सकती है। लेकिन मुझसे अगर मेरी सहज बुद्धि से पूछा जाए तो हिंदू किसी खास पूजा पद्धति से जुड़ा हुआ शब्द या परंपरा नहीं है। इसका मतलब इसकी कोई मजहबी मान्यता नहीं है। एक लार्जर कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट है हिंदू का, और वो एक व्यापक सांस्कृतिक बोध का परिचय देता है। यानी एक जीवन शैली या जीवन जीने का तरीका। अब योगा को कैसे कोई हिंदू कहेगा? योगा तो योगा है। अगर उसको आप सीमित कर देंगे एक नैरो रिलीजियस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में तो उसकी मर्यादा को ही बांध देंगे, खत्म कर देंगे। इस मायने में अब मैं मीडिया पर आता हूं। मीडिया को भी एक चश्मे से देखना या एक चश्मे का रंग देना उचित नहीं होगा। भारतीय समाज की तरह उसमें भी अनेक रंग, अनेक मिजाज और अनेक विविधताएं हैं, और ऐसा वो करता भी है। मैं भारत के सबसे बड़े मीडिया नेटवर्क का प्रतिनिधित्व करता हूं, नेटवर्क 18। हमारा न्यूज़, एंटरटेनमेंट, फैक्चुअल प्रोग्रामिंग में कई टेलीविज़न चैनल्स हैं। CNN IBN, IBN 7, IBN लोकमत, CNBC, ETV, ये सारे न्यूज़ चैनल्स हैं। कलर्स, MTV, हिस्ट्री, ये एंटरटेनमेंट और फैक्चुअल प्रोग्रामिंग के चैनल्स हैं। डिजिटल में भी हमारा दखल है। फर्स्ट पोस्ट, IBN लाइव, IBN खबर, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा। प्रिंट में भी कुछ काम है। हमारा मूल मंत्र है कंस्ट्रक्टिव एंड क्रेडिबल जर्नलिज्म। समाज में जो भी हो रहा है, अच्छा या बुरा, उनको इस दो पैमाने से दिखाना। और इसलिए हमारे आग्रह और प्रतिबद्धताएं भी हैं। हमारा आग्रह और नजरिया है भारतीयता। जो भी दिखाना भारतीय नजरिए से दिखाना। और हमारी प्रतिबद्धता है भारतीय संविधान। तो मैंने कहा कि मीडिया संस्थानों की प्रतिबद्धता भी होती है, आग्रह भी होते हैं। इसलिए कोई वो निर्जल नहीं होता है, निर्रूप नहीं होता है। और इस तरीके से इस प्रतिबद्धता और इस आग्रह के साथ हम काम करते हैं। और आखिर में मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि एक भारतीय पत्रकार होने के नाते मुझे गौरव है उसकी विरासत पर, उसकी परंपरा पर। कहीं एबरेशंस होंगे, जरूर होंगे, लेकिन वो मूल धारा नहीं है। उसकी मूल धारा जो है वो मुझे बहुत उत्साहित और आह्लादित करती है। उसमें काफी ताकत है। अंत में मैं आपसे कहना चाहूँगा कि धन्यवाद देना चाहूँगा सुशील जी कि आपने मुझे यहाँ बुलाया, मौका दिया, और ख़ासकर जो प्रोफेशनल्स हैं, अभी तो मैंने सिर्फ स्वामी जी को सुना, परमाचार्य जी को, सचमुच में ये जानना कि किस तरीके से एक जो चिरंतन परंपरा है उसके हम हिस्से हैं, उसको समझना और मीडिया के नज़रिए से उसको देखना मेरे लिए बहुत सुखद अनुभव है। आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। नमस्कार।
Thank you very much, Umesh, for a very, very professional and, as you said, very extremely super competent presentation with the kind of freedom of thought that I think is characteristic of our dharma. He had mentioned about Jaisa hai, Vaisa dikhana. I'm sorry for my Malayalamized Hindi, but I just want to say that that's not the case. Now, you look at Kashmir. You have so many temples that have been destroyed in Kashmir. Large numbers of temples. We have seen a lot in the media about a particular structure that was destroyed in Ayodhya, a structure that nobody was really worshipping in. A lot of attention has gone there. I don't see any kind of attention on the many structures that have been destroyed in Kashmir, or in fact in Afghanistan, or in fact in Pakistan, or in Bangladesh, or many parts of our country. So it's not really Jaisa hai, Vaisa dikhata. Some people seem to be excluded from Jaisa hai. So whatever happens there, somehow there's no Jaisa hai. I'll just give if you don't mind, if those of you who know, who Google can see quite a lot of my writing. And you look at the two communities, look at the Pandit community in Kashmir, the Rohingya community. Now, as I understand, I haven't heard of any Pandit involved in terrorism. I haven't heard of any Pandit involved in narcotics or any kind of violence or incitement to violence. I may be wrong. Maybe every Pandit is violent and a terrorist. But the Pandits I have met don't seem to fit that description. And I haven't read anywhere in the media. But who's interested in them? They're suffering terribly. Whereas you have the Rohingya community, which is in Myanmar. Everybody is talking about them all over the world. International media, national media, supranational media. Now, a lot of them are involved in drug trafficking. I know that. A lot of them are involved in terrorism. But everybody is talking about them in an extremely, if I may say so, a very, very compassionate way. I don't see that compassion for the Pandit community, perhaps the community may not have, maybe not being terrorist, not doing narcotics, not indulging in violence. Is that a problem? I don't know. But I just like to say that I think, quite frankly, we have to understand the media is really, it's a big black blind spot where atrocities against certain sections of people are concerned. And it's a huge megaphone where atrocities, real or imagined, against certain sections. For example, against Wahhabis. It's a huge megaphone. Everywhere in the world, there's a huge machine to take up every single so-called atrocity or non-atrocity or whatever. Whereas I think that kind of thing it's a microscope. So from a megaphone, from a huge magnifying glass, it becomes a tiny microscope that you really can't see with the naked eye. So I'm not entirely sure, Umesh, that media, and I'm proud to be part of that media, of course, is entirely as fair and as objective, as balanced as we think that is. But having said that, I'd like to move on now to Lokesh Maharaj.
Sitaram and Namaskar. Sitaram is a greeting in my home country of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm sure many of you all here might not know that much about Trinidad and Tobago. You know of Brian Lara, Sunil Narayan, Kyron Pollard, Dwayne Bravo. But there's much more to us. We, unlike a lot of the other countries and delegates that are present here today, are rooted in our background of Sanatana Dharma. Now, I belong to an organization which is called the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. We belong to an organization that was born and rooted through our ancestors who came to the West Indies in 1845, and their only means of staying together and holding that bond and staying true to their culture was through these evening gatherings and meetings where they held close and had the recitation of their holy texts. And as we continued and we forged ahead, in 1952, we gained independence from Britain. And we began to venture brave as we are, into the field of politics and educating our people. Because we learned that through education, that was the way to move forward. I'm giving you this preamble so that I could go in and venture in now into what Jagriti is all about. The word Jagriti, as we interpret it in the West Indies, in Trinidad, means an awakening. So we term it a new awakening. Jagriti has a lot to do with a need that was formed, that was seen, to educate and to continue to educate our people. The Masaba has 52 primary schools, 8 secondary schools, and 45 early childhood centers. They're all run by the Masaba through the goodwill of the community and the Hindu community. We've also been a society and a people that have been victimized to an extreme. Any aspiring law student now who would look up the most recent cases where the Privy Council has ruled that a sitting government has discriminated against a group on religious grounds would see the Sanatan Dharma Masaba first and foremost. In the case of our national award of our country, which is given every year at independence, it was named the Trinity Cross. And the religious head of the Masaba, Sanatan Dharma Masaba, we refer to him as the Dharmacharya. He was awarded that Trinity Cross, and he refused. It was the first time in our history that he refused. And we took a legal stand that we will now take it to the Privy Council and go through the High Court, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal. And when it reached the law laws in the Privy Council, they ruled that it was unjust, ordered the sitting government to change it immediately. Through the school broadcasting network in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a system where every day an hour is put aside to all the schools, the nominational schools, which are state assisted, and the government schools, where there's prayer, devotion, and announcements are made. Not once was a Hindu prayer ever played. Through the leaders of our organization, that we would take it a step forward. This can work. We have 35 plus schools at that point in time. This is in the 1995 period, and we couldn't get a single Hindu prayer, not even close to Diwali time, being played. There was always this universal prayer. You had all of these Hindu children sitting down there, and you can't even let them say their own prayer. They must wait until they go to the temples. So we said, okay, let's apply, like every other grouping, to the relevant authorities. That's all right. We'll go with it as it goes. To the relevant authorities to grant us our own broadcasting license. Why is it that the media in Trinidad must only be given out and based to those with the financial backing, the wealth? Why is it that a non-governmental organization or religious organization such as ourselves, who want to promote our ideals and our concepts of Sanatan Dharma, not have a voice on the airwaves? In my country, there are 38 radio stations. Out of those 38 radio stations, only two are Indian formatted, and only one is Hindu formatted. What I mean by Hindu formatted is that at any given time of the day, the only music you will hear on it are bhajans, chalisas, gayatris. We follow a strict regime where we observe the Sandhya every day at 6 p.m. A strict regime where we play certain music at 4 a.m. So when we did apply in 1997 to get this broadcasting license, you go to the Telecommunications Authority, this sort of thing. At the very same time, an African gentleman who was at the time one of the biggest financiers of the sitting party applied at the same time, and within 24 hours he was granted a license and we were refused. This dragged on for 3 years. So we decided, you know what, let's take a legal stance on this, the same way we did with the Trinity Cross. So we took the legal stance with it. Because why is it that what is out there in the media, the news that is reported, the music that is played, the talk shows, the content, the interaction between people must be controlled by a certain group? So we went into it, and there was a young gentleman who was part of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. He was a regular member of one of our temples. We have 357 branches. We have 5 in the United Kingdom, we have 13 in the United States, and the rest are based in Trinidad, Suriname, Guyana, St. Lucia we have 2, and across the Caribbean. Jamaica we have 3. So there's this young lawyer. He said, I'm going to take up this case. His name is Anand Ram Logan. We took up the case. It lasted 7 years, from the year 2000 to the year 2007. And we were finally granted that license, where the Privy Council once again ruled that the sitting government of the day had discriminated against a grouping based on their religious beliefs, and ordered them forthwith to grant us that license. The lawyer who fought that case for us is currently the sitting Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. So once we were granted this license, we decided, okay, we're going to launch Jagriti. Let's do this. A lot of people said to us, well, you fight this case for 7 years. Now, he did all of this legal work pro bono for us. What are you going to do with this Jagriti station? What is it going to be about? You're coming, you're launching, you're saying you're different, you're a Hindu radio station, a Hindu media house. What does it mean to be a Hindu media house? This is how we start, and this is our jingle, what you hear every 15 minutes. Oh, it's giving some trouble. All right, no problem. I'll just continue and talk then. But I had prepared for you all some snippets of what we did and how we continue and how we propagate with our programming and this and that. But one of the other things that I saw were objective. Well, I continue while I try to fix the technical difficulties, right? So we started, and there was a lot of discrepancy and whatnot within the market. People were looking at us, well, is sure this going to work? This is a cosmopolitan society. What makes you think that you come up with a Hindu media station, a Hindu radio station, a Hindu media house, are you going to get any response? In all honesty, the first year that we were on air, every year in Trinidad and Tobago, there's something called an MFO survey, which is done by independent groups through the University of the West Indies, which gauge the listenership, the response, this, that, and the other. We got 1%. After our very first year, 1%. Our overhead costs, day-to-day running costs, were much more than our revenue. So, all right, we got to continue with this. Can't fight for 7 years, go all the way to the Privy Council, come out with this idea and this concept that, you know what, the Hindu people need a voice. Because one thing about the Hindus in Trinidad and Tobago is that when Mr. Sushil was speaking at the opening, he used the term when he was in reference to the self-hating Jew. In Trinidad and Tobago, one thing about Hindus is that the sitting and the first prime minister and the longest serving prime minister of our country referred to the Hindu people as a hostile and recalcitrant minority. And we hold that Hindus in Trinidad and Tobago very, very deep and dear to our hearts. We don't ever let that go, because you cannot run over us. For a prime minister who ruled for almost 30 years to refer to us as that meant that he could not break us, could not break the people, their mindset, their mentality, what they were. So we never have and we never will give up. The very first college we started we named it the Lakshmi Girls Hindu College. The Lakshmi Girls Hindu College was laughed at and referred to as the see-through college, because it was an old hotel that didn't even have windows or anything. And through benefactors, we said, all right, you know what, we would do this and let's give our Hindu girls a place to go. So we continued with that. And this is part of the struggle that Jagriti was all about. Today, Lakshmi Girls Hindu College is the second highest and second ranked all-girls college in the country. This year, the girls from that college, out of a class of 120 that sat CAPE examinations, CAPE is our equivalent in the Caribbean of the GCE advanced level. They received 29 open scholarships from the government, which means that they could go anywhere in the world and travel and their tuition will be paid. And we continued along this mode of using this media. And why I mention the colleges is because on a daily basis, from each one of our 5 colleges, we dedicate 2 hours to the students of the college, where they come into our studios and they hold discussions pertaining to issues that are burning of the day. They use this now as not only a forum for the youth to vent their issues, but for them to have an impact and an influence on the news. Because we realize that the purpose of news and media is not only for entertainment. Media is a form of educating, a transmission of knowledge, a transmission of information from one person to the next. It's not only going in your car and turning on the radio to hear your favorite song playing, to bob along your head and clap your hand. It's a form of educating yourself, of knowing that, hey, this is happening, this is going on. But it's also a form of you having a voice to comment on the issues that make the news, to comment on the issues that could impact and influence. So we continued along, and by the 3rd year of our operation, we were able to gain 8% of the market share within 4 years, being strictly Hindu. Strictly Hindu. At present day, the population of Trinidad and Tobago, the latest CSO survey, which is Central Statistical Office, puts the East Indian population at 35%. And out of that, the Hindu population is 28% of the national population, compared to 10 years, 15 years ago, where it was only 20%. And I say that in the context that a lot of people will think in these small Caribbean islands, all those who follow, well, I know you're not supposed to say Hindu, I've been saying it a lot, you're supposed to say Sanatan Dharma. But in the Western world and in the Caribbean, there's no such thing as, you're defined, you're a Hindu, that's it. No Sanatanist, and just, you're a Hindu. Plain and foremost, they don't refer to you as a Sanatanist or this or that or the other, you're a Hindu. Right? I mean, we classify all Christians as Christians, whether you're Anglican, whatever you are, Protestant, Jehovah, this, that, Christian. So it has shown, and it goes to show, that with the advent of what we went into, the Hindu media, which is a term that a lot of people find strange to understand, because media is all-encompassing. It's not supposed to be restricted for one group alone. It's not supposed to be, a lot of people have the concept too, where they hear about these Hindu schools, or what you call denominational schools, that it's only for Hindu children. No, it doesn't work that way. In a society that's open and all-encompassing, you educate, you reach out, and whether they want to grab the hand and take it or not, it's entirely up to them. We have been able to grow exponentially, where out of the 28% that are practicing Hindus in Trinidad and Tobago, now our population is 1.3 million. Out of the 28%, 6% out of that 28% are non-Indians. Are non-Indians. They are Chinese, Syrians, Africans, mixed, who are practicing Hindus. And when I say practicing Hindus, they're probably stricter Hindu than me. Right? They're even stricter Hindu than me. So they are very strict practicing Hindus. Only recently, about 2 years, we ventured into television. And our television is the exact same replica, where we are on all 3 cable networks. If the slide was working, I'd show you some of our user statistics, because we also stream 24 hours a day online. So far, between April to October 31st, We've had over 3 million logs into the websites to view all of our programming in that 4-month period. Diwali Day, we were able to bring live on TV in Trinidad along all three. We have 3 major cable networks in Trinidad, cable providers. We're on with all 3. We were able to bring 2 hours of live Diwali celebrations from New York. So both people in New York and those in Trinidad were able to see it and communicate with each other. That's the purpose of the media. A form of communicating, a form of sharing that information. The Caribbean struggle is one very different to what you would face in Bharat, what you would face in the UK, what you would face in anywhere else of the world, in Mauritius or Fiji. It's different. But we were able to use that community feeling, that grouping together that was brought to us by our ancestors. That the only way they could have stick together and hold together as a people was to go nightly and meet in these little panchayats. And the one pundit or whoever it was would bring out the Ramayana or the Bhagavad and read. In 2010, something historic happened in Trinidad, where for the very first time we had a female prime minister. That female prime minister was not only the very first female prime minister, but she was the very first female Hindu prime minister. As Kamla Prasad Bisesa. And I draw reference to that because when I told you about when we opened Lakshmi Girls Hindu College, which they call the See-Through College, the second name on the staff register was Kamla Prasad Bisesa. And she is today the sitting Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the first female Hindu Prime Minister. And it goes to show that when it grew with media, and it does have that influence into people and their way of thinking, because she was instrumental in us getting Jagriti. And by the time now that Jagriti was on air in 2007, within 3 years' time, the popularity, but not only the popularity, but the information and the knowledge of the Hindu that was always considered this hostile and recalcitrant minority. The elders who never cared to go out and vote, who always felt, well, you know, I do have a voice. There's nothing I could say or do. They now felt they had a voice, right? So with that, that's my closing. I want to thank you all for your attention, and I'm privileged to be here.
Well done, Lokesh. I think you're really a good fight, and you've done amazingly well. The point is that the community, the dharmic community anywhere, I mean, they have qualities that are beneficial to everybody in society. So any society that discriminates against them, that does anything against them, that society becomes, in fact, self-defeating. It's like a self-goal. Now, you have countries like Fiji, you have other countries where there's discrimination. I mean, you have countries like Pakistan, you have in some parts of Bangladesh. All these countries have shown that they have a self-goal, and they are worse off because of that discrimination. So I think that's one very important lesson. The second, I think, is that, you know, Paramacharya was talking about Prime Minister Modi. I think one of the good things that has happened now that he has become Prime Minister, and even before that, was the fact that there is now a confidence among people that was not there in the past. And that confidence is not only in India, it's across the world. I saw it in the United States, it's there in Australia. And that confidence is a very deserved and justified confidence. So I'm delighted that he exemplifies that kind of confidence. He probably had it in the past, but many more people have got it in the present because of the Prime Minister. Having said that, I'd like to just now request Sri Kiran Ramsahai, who's the editor of a French newspaper in Mauritius. And again, I'd like to say that there are individuals who talk about some languages being Hindu, and some dresses being Hindu, some foods being Hindu. For me, as a practicing individual, every language is Hindu. This is a universal culture, a universal dharma, and it encompasses every part of the world the way oxygen does. In that spirit, let me welcome Kiran and request him to give his views.
Mr. Chairman, fellow panelists, my good friend Sri Sushil Pandit ji, I would wish to first of all thank my friend Sushil for having given me the opportunity to be here this afternoon to talk about some aspects of what is conveniently now called the Hindu media. When Sushil ji invited me, he was in Port Louis in my office, I told him I may not be in Delhi in November because that could be almost the eve of a general election that could change the whole face of Mauritius, that could change the whole face of the Hindu ethos in Mauritius. That was so important, an election that is going to happen. Then I said no. He insisted that I should be here. I said, yes, let me be here. The elections can wait. No, elections are not waiting. I would wish before proceeding to give a brief expose of the Mauritian media. I think that's very important so that, you know, when we come to tactics and strategies, you may understand my mindset, which may be slightly different from what we have here in Bharat. You know, the landscape, media landscape in Mauritius, more often than not, would be almost similar to what we may have in other countries with a sizable Hindu population like Trinidad and Tobago, Fiji, Guyana, and what you have. I would think to some extent to even our dear Bharat Mata, these similarities are bound to be there. Mauritius has around 68% of its population of Bharatiya origin, out of which 50% would be, slightly over 50% would be of Hindu denomination, around 18% Muslim, and the rest Christians. Like you have there, that's a groups, everybody, you are the Catholic, Anglican, or what you have. The Mauritian media has a history of slightly over 240 years. Would be one of the oldest media that you may have in the southern hemisphere. Throughout its history, Mauritius has been traditionally dominated by a Christian print media that has all along been subtly but very systematically anti-Hindu, despite the fact that we have a sizable Hindu population, and like what you may have, for instance, in Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago. More importantly, the media has acted as an agent for the then colonial power and the church establishment, which means almost the same thing, because the ancient colonial power and the Christian establishment has been working hand in hand against the rest of the population. They had a kind of a twofold mission. The first one was openly to manifest hostility, antagonism, and repression against all attempts to bring cultural, social, political, economic emancipation and development of Hindus in Mauritius. Second, it was surreptitiously involved in the active conversion of Hindus to Christianity. Maybe important to mention here that in those days, to get a job in the government establishment, Hindus had to convert themselves into Christianity. That was, you know, almost mandatory. Otherwise, you don't get a job in the establishment. So the mission of the media has constantly been to undermine and to whatever extent possible, bring down Hindu political power and Hindus who hold key positions at different levels in the Mauritian society. Now, when we talk of Hindu media, and this is where I tend to agree with our chairman here, well, we're not talking of Hindus as a group belonging to a specific religion. Hinduism is not a religion, for heaven's sake. Let that be said time and again. Hinduism is not a religion. Hinduism, I've tried to find all sorts of definitions, but then we don't go by the definitions that some people from the West would impose on us. Sanatan Dharma is what? What is Sanatan? Sanatan, as far as I know, means eternal. What is Dharma? Dharma means a way of life. I tend to tell, if you may allow me to digress very quickly, I used to tell my non-Hindus friends in Mauritius when they tell me, what is Hinduism? I said, well, Hinduism is a misnomer to begin with. What it means, fundamentally, it is Sanatan Dharma, and Sanatan Dharma means eternal dharma. They say, what is this tricky thing about dharma? I said, dharma is very simple. There's nothing complex about it. It is the fundamental characteristic of something or somebody. That is dharma. The dharma of the sun is to shine. The day the sun stops shining, there will be chaos in the cosmos. So this is what Hinduism is a way of life, is a righteous way of life. When we talk about Hindu media, we're not here to say that we need to saffronize the media. Far from that. When we talk about a Hindu media, we are not saying a Hindu media in relation to, let's say, if that at all exists, a Christian media or a Muslim media or a Jew media. When we're talking of a Hindu media, we are talking of a media that would at least consider Hindus as a community that exists, right, at the same level as other communities. In trying to be too secular, we have that tendency to undermine the right and the fundamental rights of Hindus. What is the pseudo kind of secularism that we talk about in the media here in India, in Bharat? When, as an outsider, when I look at the Indian media, I keep asking myself, my goodness, what will happen to Hinduism 100 years down the line? The Dalai Lama was saying today that we have traditions that go back to 2 millennia, 2,000 years. Very true. But I've been following India for the past 35 years very closely. I've studied in India. I like India. I love Bharat, right? And I follow that almost on a daily basis. The elections that happened in May this year was followed by us as if these elections were happening in Mauritius. And I need to say, I don't have any qualms in saying the day Mr. Modi was elected as Prime Minister, Mauritius, Hindus of Mauritius decided that now we can rely on Bharat. We say so because so far, besides declarations of intentions, I'm not too sure whether previous governments in Bharat has been showing any interest in people of Indian origin living overseas. I remember as far back as 1982 when Srimati Indira Gandhi came to Mauritius. I asked her a question. That was the time when there was repression going on in Fiji Islands. General Rabuka decided to, topple the government and create a lot of repression. I asked Mrs. Gandhi, would India intervene? Would India help people of Indian origin in Fiji? The answer from Mrs. Gandhi was no, an outright no, in the name of non-interference. He said Fiji is a sovereign island, it's a sovereign government. We have no right to get into that. Well, if we cannot rely on Bharat Mata to help us in time of dire need, where else do we go, people of Bharatiya origin? This is why when Modi ji was elected, then we said, yes, yes, there is hope. There is hope for we people who, despite being in a majority in an island, we are being seen as pariahs. We are being seen as being heathens. Because non-Catholics, non-Christians in Mauritius are still being treated as heathens. So this is the kind of responsibility and role that we people of the media need to have to be able to change mindset, to change the attitude of people, to see us as individuals in our own rights. In trying to fight for minorities, yes, we are here to protect the rights of minorities, but in so doing, let us not trample our own rights. Let us not be apologetic to call ourselves Hindus. This is what I think the role of a Hindu media, without having to specifically call it Hindu media. This is the kind of role that it has to play to make us Hindu feel proud of being Hindus and not to be apologetic about being it. We need, in Mauritius, unfortunately, we are forced to be apologetic by being Hindus. Can this continue to happen? So this is why I said when Mr. Pandit told me to come over here, I said, yes, I need to come because this is what I've been doing throughout my 35 years of career in Mauritius, to fight for the Hindu community, to ensure that there is a media that will fight for Hindus. Again, without trying to saffronize it. I don't claim to be a Hindu media per se in Mauritius. It's not by calling yourself a Hindu media that you fight for the interests of Hindus. It is by the way you report, by the way you come up with information, whether it is entertainment, whether it is news. Alas, when I see the kind of entertainment which is very dominant in today's media, again, I ask myself, if corrective measures are not brought, whether 50, 75, 100 years down the line, whether that identity called Hindus would still be prevailing. Because as an outsider, I watch that Indian values, whatever used to stand as Indian ethos, are gradually eroding. And eroding in such a way, right, inexorably. And if we do not stop it, we may not have a Hindu entity maybe 100 years down the line. This is where I think it is very important for this concept of Hindu media to come up, to change the mindset, to make people think different, right? To give the right of people. Now, what's happening in my country, I tell you, brothers and sisters, I've got some of my fellow compatriots here. We may come back to you, we may come back to Bharat and say, please save us, if at all. The plans that some people have in Mauritius will come into existence. The only thing we have so far in Mauritius is a little bit of Hindu power, that's all. And that Hindu power, despite being in majority, needs to be sustained with the help of other minorities. And this may go forever, if at all, the schemes of some people in Mauritius would see light of the day. And I think this is a very major problem that we will be facing if we don't have intervention from elsewhere, including from Bharat. I don't know whether you understand what I mean, but this is a very serious thing that is happening in Mauritius. Leave alone Hindu media, the very Hindu concept may not even exist in years to come. So this is the kind of mission that we have to play as a media, Hindu media, but again, whether you call it Sanatan media, Sanatan Dharma media, or Hindu media, we need to have a media where media people will be trained, where media, especially young media people, will be instilled with a different kind of mindset, where there'll be a change in mentality, right, to be proud of being a Hindu. I watch very keenly and very assiduously the Hindu media, the Indian media in Mauritius. I'm sorry to say, my dear colleagues from Bharat, not always we feel proud of it. Not always, you know. Somebody said earlier, when one masjid is being assaulted or something wrong happening to it, the national media will make it as a national issue. When Hindus would be killed, murdered, temples will be destroyed, and if anybody stands up to this, he is a communist, he is an, fundamentalist, an extremist, or why not even a terrorist. This should stop. I think this is what the Hindu media needs to be doing, to change that mentality, right, to make people understand that Hindus have the same right as minorities, and that that paradox should stop once for all. We don't say that India, Bharat, belongs to Hindus only, far from that. But then maybe we need to revisit our concept of what is meant by secular. I think for too long we have gone into a kind of pseudo-secularism to the extent of even putting our mothers, sisters' life in danger. So this is what I think we need to be revisiting. But then for all this to happen, I think there need to be a kind of an organization. Maybe this could be taken over by the Hindu Congress, trying to have an organization where people would be, at the apex, will be trained, and these people will percolate further down so that they'll know what kind of things needs to be done. Unless there's a kind of guidance coming from the top, unless there's a kind of a, I won't say control, but at least a kind of code of conduct has to be there. Ethics have to be there. Then we can call people to order. Today, can we call any member of the media to order if anything wrong happens to the Hindu? No, the day we do that, again, we'll be called terrorists, we'll be called fundamentalists. So what I'm saying is that we need to have an organization that would serve both as a watchdog and a bulldog, right, to defend the interest of Hindus as far as the media is concerned. When I say media, it's whether it is the print media, whether it is the electronic media, whether it is audiovisual, but more importantly, the social media. See that kind of damage that is being caused on social media as far as Hindus is concerned. When I read, you know, news feeds from the internet, from the Times of India or the Indian Express, but then more importantly, when I see the comments from people. Recently, I was seeing comments, you know, some people took there was one article in favor of some Hindu things happening. You will have 71 comments, you know, anti-Hindus. And those 71 anti-Hindu comments coming from Hindu people only. So should this continue to happen? Should this continue to happen in a place where now we cannot defend our own brothers, our own sisters, our own mothers? When one Muslim lady is being assaulted, there is kind of a lot of hangama happening. When it happens to our sisters, right? We have no right to defend. So this needs to stop. This is why I say that we need to have a kind of an organization. We need to have a kind of a commando put in place. Please bear with me. Nothing to do with terrorism. An intellectual kind of commando has to be there. We need to set, you know, our rules and regulations, our code of conduct, and insist on journalists, right? And that organization would be taking to task any kind of journalist, you know, those very secular journalists that we have, you know, at various levels of the media here, right? Should be able to take to task. Do we have a platform to do that today? No, we don't have it. So this is why I think the concept of Hindu media should be encouraged and should be promoted.
I mean, if we don't report this, then who else is going to report this? And secondly, I think our friends in Mauritius, etc., have to introspect. Why is it that they're not able to excite the interests of people in their plight? I mean, what is the problem in that? And I do believe that it is possible to do that, but I do believe that this lack of confidence, you know, this perception that you're permanently going to be discriminated against, a natural order of life. I think it's important to understand discrimination is not natural, and discrimination against a community that's so vibrant. Now, I just want to, one more minute, Sushil, the knowledge economy. You go to San Jose, you go to Bangalore, you go to Hyderabad, you see a lot of people of a particular community who are the top people in that particular thing. And the reason is, the very reason why I'm not as worried as Kiran is about something going away in 75 years or 150 years. It's this very absence of rules, this very absence of boundaries, this very absence, if I may say so, of dogma that has made these minds the best minds in the knowledge economy. And if tomorrow's knowledge economy is going to be tomorrow's economy, I think this kind of mind is going to dominate that economy. So, having said that, I'm sorry, you know, we have overstepped our time. I request about 10 minutes of the tea time for questions. Yeah, maybe questions. Yeah, for questions, exactly. Sorry. You can address your questions to whichever speaker, distinguished speaker, you would like to ask the question to. Please go ahead, madam. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Bipin Sharma from 10 News. So my question is for Mr. Kiran. So you know, in the end, you said that pseudo-secularism you were talking about. So hearts of hearts, we all agree that it is the, you know, the real burning issue, because there is no problem in being secular and being called a secular and propagating secularism, no doubts about that. But pseudo-secularism is the root cause. Is that what you have been insinuating?
Not insinuating, I've been saying that emphatically.
Very correct.
This is what I mean.
No, I think what he's saying is that, you know, if you should have the same yardstick for discrimination against anybody, any group, any community. You can't ignore happening to one community and then emphasize only some other people.
So what is the remedy for that? I mean, because the way, I mean, this rampantly it is everywhere, you know, people take great pride, and then, I mean, without getting into the political side of the debate or the, you know, discussion, you know, there are so many political parties now joining hands, and just in the name of, you know, being secular. So, I mean, it's a very serious issue. On one hand, you have development, and then, you know, people are doing some amazing things. The new government, as you rightly mentioned, ever since the new Prime Minister took over, and, you know, the way things are moving now, at last, you know, and so many people, and we've seen the euphoria in the United States of America, then Australia, and so, I mean, and also these crowds are not stage managed. I mean, as someone, yeah.
So
remedy.
I think I've got your point. And this is a very tricky issue. Yes, secularism has to be there. Is there any entity as secular as Sanatana Dharma?
Quite true.
Yes.
Right. No, what I mean, very important point. Just take it for example, while the campaign was on for the last general election in India, right? In the name of that pseudo-secularism, right? Trying to brand the BJP as being fundamentalist. Do you call that secularism? This is what I meant by pseudo-secularism. You know, BJP, anything BJP is Hindutva, is, you know, what you have, right? So we need to stop this.
अध्यक्ष महोदय, मैं जो बात आप कह रहे हैं, मैं वहीं से शुरू करना चाहती थी. हिंदू शब्द का पॉलिटिकलाइजेशन हो गया है. हिंदू मतलब अगर पॉलिटिकल उसमें देखेंगे और न्यूज़ के पर्सपेक्टिव से देखेंगे, हिंदू का मतलब है भारतीय जनता पार्टी, और बाकी सब सेकुलरिस्ट हैं या कांग्रेस है. हिंदू शब्द का पूरा पॉलिटिकलाइजेशन हो चुका है. अगर कोई भी व्यक्ति बात इतना हद तक पॉलिटिकलाइजेशन हुआ है, मैं उमेश जी से सवाल पूछना चाहती हूँ. उमेश जी, मैं सुशील जी को सबसे पहले धन्यवाद देना चाहती हूँ कि उन्होंने एक व्यक्ति ऐसा बुला लिया कि भले ही वो उसको मीन नहीं करते हो और वो हमारी ही बात को कहना चाह रहे हैं आगे, लेकिन एक टारगेट हो गए हैं वो अभी फ़िलहाल, क्योंकि मैं उमेश जी ही इस एक्टिव मीडिया से यहाँ पर अभी हैं. मैं पूछना चाह रही हूँ, आप कह रहे हैं कि कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हिंदू शब्द कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, सांस्कृतिक बोध है, लेकिन क्या मीडिया ये मान रहा है? क्या पिछले 30-40 वर्षों का इतिहास मीडिया का उसने ये माना है कभी? क्या उसने किसी एक बात से ये सिद्ध किया है? गोधरा कांड हो या अनंतनाग और वैरीनाग के टूटते हुए मंदिर हो. जब अनंतनाग और वैरीनाग के मंदिर टूटे तो एक आवाज़ मीडिया से नहीं आई, लेकिन जब 6 दिसंबर हुआ तो पूरा का पूरा देश और पूरे समाचार पत्र काले हो गए. इंटरनेशनल मीडिया तो काला हुआ ही, मेरे देश का मीडिया काला हो गया. लेकिन एक भी शब्द किसी ने ये नहीं बताया, किसी ने कुतुब कॉम्प्लेक्स की बात नहीं की कि वहाँ लगा हुआ है ये सच्चाई है. सत्यों से, तथ्यों से, साक्ष्यों से परे जाते हुए हम सिर्फ ये कहते रहे कि नहीं, राम जन्मभूमि मंदिर एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता था, जबकि वो करता था. इस देश के 3000 मंदिर टूटे हुए इस बात की गवाही देते थे, लेकिन कितने अखबारों ने ये सूचना दी? मुझे याद है 28 फरवरी 2001 का वो दिन जब टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया की रिपोर्टिंग गोधरा कांड पर हुई और उन्होंने कहा कि अयोध्या के कुछ लोग कार सेवक वहाँ जा रहे थे, उन्होंने क्योंकि कुछ मुस्लिम खोमचे वालों से दंगा फसाद किया, इसलिए उन्होंने उन्हें जला दिया. एक छोटी सी मुठभेड़, छोटी सी बात पर इसलिए टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया का रिपोर्टर को ये कहने का अधिकार मिल जाता है कि इसलिए उन्होंने 55 लोगों को की बोगी को जला दिया जिंदा, और उस पर कोई रिपोर्टिंग. और उसके बाद IBN 7 में ही थे ना राजदीप सरदेसाई. नहीं, मैं I'm coming to the point.
मुझे ऐसा
I'm
लगता
just
है व्यक्तियों और संस्थानों
मैं
के
क्वेश्चन
नामों
से
की
पूछ
चर्चा
रही
ना
हूँ.
करें.
मैं एक बात कह रही हूँ. मुजफ्फरनगर के दंगे हुए अभी, एक मीडिया का एक व्यक्ति मारा गया, IBN का था. क्या हमारे मीडिया रिपोर्टिंग करने की हिम्मत कर सका कि वो क्यों मारा गया? नहीं किया। मैं ये पूछना चाह रही हूँ, सुशील जी ने अपनी बात में बहुत, अपने इंट्रोडक्शन में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात पूछी, हमारे साइकी की, हमारे मानस की। हम सेल्फ लोथिंग क्यों है? हमारे डीएनए में ये बात आई कहाँ से है कि हिंदू होना कोई खराब बात हो गई क्या? हम सब अपने घर में पूजा पाठ करके चले आते हैं। राम शरण शर्मा इतिहासकार थे, राम नाम रखते हैं लेकिन राम का विरोध करते हैं। ये जो सेल्फ लोथिंग टेंडेंसी है, ये उस जिमी एटीट्यूड से आई है, उस जिमी एटीट्यूड से जिसमें कोई भी अपने आप को बचाव करना चाहते थे। अगर नहीं, जिमी एटीट्यूड में नहीं हुए, अगर मुस्लिम शासकों से जाके ये नहीं कहा कि हम आपकी सेवा में हैं, हमारे मुंह के अंदर थूकिए, हमारा मुंह खुला है, और नहीं तो आप एलिमिनेट कर दिए जाओगे, वो जो 300, 400, 500 साल से जो जिमी एटीट्यूड चला आ रहा है, वह हमें सेल्फ लोथिंग बना रहा है। जो हिंदू बैशिंग चलती है, ये जो सीधे सेक्युलरिज्म के नाम पर जो जिस प्रकार से तथ्यों और साक्ष्यों के साथ खिलवाड़ किया गया है।
उमेश, I think, उमेश,
नहीं, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि यदि आई एम सेइंग ओके, मैं ये पूछना चाह रही हूँ कि हिंदू इंटरनेशनल मीडिया में और just a minute, I will not disturb you again. बस 1 मिनट। हिंदू पीएम की बात हमने करी, बहुत अच्छी बात है कि हिंदू पीएम है और हमारे लिए गौरव का विषय है, लेकिन विदेशों में हिंदू पीएम या हिंदू पार्टी गौरव का विषय नहीं थी, वो डिस्क्रिमिनेटेड थी कि ये हिंदुओं की पार्टी है, बीजेपी हिंदुओं की पार्टी है। और हिंदू कौन है? तो क्या नरसिम्हा राव हिंदू नहीं थे, या और दूसरे प्राइम मिनिस्टर हिंदू नहीं थे इस देश के? तो ये जो पॉलिटिकलाइजेशन हुआ है, इसके बारे में मेरी चिंता है, ये जो मीडिया ने किया है।
सवाल किससे है? एक ही बात कहूँगा, चूँकि आपने, मैं सवाल तो समझा नहीं, लेकिन आपकी टिप्पणियाँ हैं जो आप सोचती हैं ठीक हैं। एक तो ये कि कुछ व्यक्ति और संस्थाओं का आपने नाम लिया, वो यहाँ डिफेंड करने के लिए नहीं है, इसलिए वो लेना उचित नहीं है, और मैं उनके बिहाफ पर कुछ नहीं कह सकता। प्रोफेसर मोनू नलपत ने भी एक बात कही और उसका एक मिला जुला जवाब देता हूँ। मीडिया कोई ऐसी एंटिटी नहीं है जो समाज से बाहर होती है, समाज के पावर स्ट्रक्चर को रिफ्लेक्ट करती है वो, दुनिया के स्तर पर भी और भारत के स्तर पर भी। समाज का जो पावर बैलेंस है वो रिफ्लेक्ट होता है, इसलिए मीडिया में भी प्रोफेसर नलपत, समाज में जो पावर स्ट्रक्चर है, पावर बैलेंस है, वो रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है, वैसा का वैसा जैसा है। और इसलिए अगर उसमें फर्क आता है, और आई एम नॉट देयर टू कमेंट कि फर्क आना चाहिए या नहीं आना चाहिए एज अ मीडिया मैन, अगर आप व्यक्तिगत रूप से पूछेंगे तो मैं ज़रूर जवाब दूंगा, लेकिन वो पावर बैलेंस जब चेंज होता है तो चेंजेस आते हैं और चेंजेस आ रहे हैं, ये इतना मैं कह सकता हूँ।
Umesh, that is a very honest answer. Thank you very much. One final question before we break.
Yeah, Sridhar Damle from Chicago. My question to Umesh ji, आपने जो होलियर दिन दाऊद का एटीट्यूड प्रेजेंटेशन किया था मीडिया के बारे में, मीडिया इज मीडिया। अब मेरा सवाल है कि इंडियन मीडिया में हिपोक्रेसी बहुत है। दूसरा सवाल है कि आप कहते हैं कि मीडिया में मीडिया होता है, आपको पता होना चाहिए क्रिश्चियन न्यूज़पेपर है, क्रिश्चियन टीवी स्टेशंस है अब प्रदेश में, तो वैसा मुस्लिम न्यूज़ स्टेशन है अल जज़ीरा, पता आपको पता होगा, वैसा हर मीडिया का होता है। अच्छा है कि बुरा है वो ये बात अलग है, लेकिन अगर हम चाहते हैं कि नहीं है, ऐसी बातें करना उचित नहीं है।
मैं होलियर दाऊ दाएँ की बात नहीं कर, देन दाऊ की बात नहीं कर रहा था, मैं भारतीय संदर्भ की बात कर रहा था, एक बात। दूसरा, मेरा जो पहला आंसर था वही आपके प्रश्न का जवाब है। आप के पास जब पावर स्ट्रक्चर में बैलेंस करने की ताकत आएगी तो आप कर पाएंगे। इसी मीडिया के बावजूद जो कहा गया, जो बदलाव हुए हैं ना, और इसलिए मैं ऐसा बोलता हूं कि मीडिया को ऑल परवेसिव, ऑल पावरफुल, डूइंग एवरीथिंग समझना भी ठीक नहीं है। मीडिया का एक रोल है समाज के अंदर, उतना ही समझना चाहिए। और जब उससे ज़्यादा हम समझते हैं तो तकलीफ होती है। पर मैं आपसे इतना कह सकता हूं कि ये पूरी दुनिया का जो पावर बैलेंस है, मीडिया उसका हिस्सा है और सब कुछ उसके अंदर वैसा का वैसा रिफ्लेक्ट होता है। दिस इज माय take on your question. Thank you.
I want to thank you. Sorry.
One last question.
Please, please.
My name is Sandeep. I'm from Bangalore.
Okay.
My question is again for Mr. Upadhyay.
Oh, Umesh, you are very, very popular in this hall.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. So your point on power structure is noted, but that apart, if you look at how media has been traditionally defined, it's been defined to act as a fourth estate, fourth pillar of a democracy. If a government goes wrong, ruling dispensation goes wrong, it is its job to correct it or at least make the public aware of it, right? So when you talk about power structure, does that include sucking up to the government? Which is pretty much why existing, at least mainstream English media, TV channels, this is a perception that's been created that it has become a handmaiden of a particular political party. And your own, that same gentleman, Mr. Sardesai,
No.
Does
no
that
names,
mean?
please. No names, please.
I will again object.
No, it's the truth because.
Please. It's not.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not fair.
fair enough. So on his show, he once said openly that on my channel, no criticism of the Gandhis would be allowed. I don't know, I mean, how you want to define a power structure, or second point is, apart from the power structure, there's something fundamental called a distinction, clear distinction between right and wrong.
Before Umesh answers, I just want to say that if Rajdeep said that, I would like to say that 3 cheers to Rajdeep for being open and frank about this kind of thing, because I would much rather have someone who's quite open about the bias rather than someone who has a bias and who hides it and pretends not to have a bias. Sorry. Go ahead, Umesh.
See, that's you can have your views. That's fine, perfectly fine. As the journalists have their own views, उसी के बीच में कहीं ना कहीं बैलेंस निकल जाता है। अभी देखिए, मीडिया पर ये आरोप तो हमेशा लगते हैं, कोई नया आरोप नहीं है ये कि आप इसके साथ हैं उसके साथ हैं। आज आरोप ये लग रहा है कि हर टेलीविज़न चैनल में सिर्फ एक ही चेहरा दिखाई देता है। वो उनका कोई भी स्पीच होता है तो लाइव दिखाते हैं, हर चैनल दिखाता है। ये नहीं, मैं ये बोल रहा हूँ ना कि ये तो समय समय पर, लेकिन बाय एंड लार्ज अगर आप देखेंगे इंडियन मीडिया को आज़ादी के बाद से, इंडियन मीडिया का एक बहुत पॉजिटिव कंस्ट्रक्टिव रोल रहा है इन मैच्योरिंग ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी, एंड दैट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. वी आर proud of that, and that ethos come from our civilizational ethos. The democratic values come from our civilizational ethos only. So just don't take a couple of examples and make them as the rule, but so far I would say, and I can say it again and again, that Indian media per se has been very, very instrumental in bringing these fundamental changes in the society, strengthening of democracy in India, and that's what it is. But I can't speak for individuals, what individuals said or did not say.
Thank you. I think, I'm sorry, but we don't have time. Yeah, Sushil?
Yeah, Chairman sir.
I think...
A small, yes.
Yeah.
For you to reflect and to give your wind-up comments.
I simply want to say that I think it's good that we have had a very free discussion. I think we feel that we are speaking our minds honestly, and we are speaking our minds honestly about individuals. I think that's a very good thing. I would not agree with Umesh that we have really a very free media. I don't think we have a free media. I feel that it is a very skewed media. I don't feel that we have a free system of law. We have a colonial system of law. We have a colonial system of administration. But the good news, I think, is that the people of this country, especially the youth, because of the social media, because of the new platforms, they are getting more and more empowered. And I think a time is coming in India when finally civil society will become at least equal in power to the civil service. When that happens, I'll be convinced India is a democracy. That this process of this conference that Sushil has organized, I think is part of that conference. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening patiently. I'd like to apologize to the Paramacharya for insisting on Sanatan Dharma rather than Hindu. But I think each of us has the right to our own opinion. And that is the greatness of this dharma. And I think therefore, whether it's Umesh, whether it's myself, whether it is Paramacharya, whether it is Sushil, each of us are as good or as bad as every other. And I think that is the great dharma. It was not abolished during so many years of oppression, so many years of conflict, so many years of occupation. This dharma has continued in a very strong way. And I am very, very certain, sir, it's going to continue way beyond 75 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.